Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Soulful Abundance Festival. I'm your host, Elise Preston, founder of Be More Connected. And today I am so thrilled and so excited to be here with sexual empowerment coach, Nguyen. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yes. And Anne is a Vietnamese American women's sexual empowerment coach whose work centers on pleasure as a liberatory practice and fuel for personal empowerment. She teaches women how to love their bodies, to see sexuality as sacred, and how to channel orgasmic pleasure into better relationships, career, leadership, and self-love. Through her coaching and online programs, she reconnects women to the power of their sexuality and facilitates deep transformation for sexual reclamation. Most of all, she's here to make our modern day sexual revolution fun and accessible to all. Love this bio so much.
I was going to say, I love the way you read it. Your voice is so beautiful. I'm like, ooh, Elise, introducing all the time.
Oh, yes. I'm just so excited to be able to dive in deeper around some of these concepts that you've woven so beautifully into your bio and just into your life's work. And I know that I shared that more formal description of your bio, but would also love to be able to hear in your own words a bit about your own journey and how you found your way to the work that you're doing in the world today.
Yeah. So, yes, as you introduced me, I am a sexual empowerment coach. And I think, like most people who find themselves in any sort of healing work or facilitating transformation, it's always going to be a personal transformation that we walked through the fires in. And so for me, I grew up like most of us in this very sex confused and sex negative culture. And my background is that I'm a first generation Vietnamese American woman. And so culturally and, in my family as well, sex, our bodies, our pleasure, none of that was ever talked about. My mom was sort of like, school will take care of that. And we all know what happens there. Not much. And so, sex and sexuality, and most of all, I would say valuing myself and making myself part of that picture was something that was completely foreign to me. I grew up like most of us thinking that sex was something that we had to perform or to give to partners, or that our bodies were ways to ensure that we were loved. And so I really fell into a lot of those patterns in my teens and in my early 20s. Until one day I realized, like, oh, wait, maybe my pleasure could be part of this picture. And, I had been through kind of toxic relationships, all of that really fun stuff. And, I started searching the internet as one does when they have questions, this is, before Instagram, even going down really weird rabbit holes and not really finding anything helpful. Until I found my teacher that ran the coaching program that I did, named Layla Martin. And she really talked about pleasure and sexuality as a way to honor yourself first and foremost, to show your self-love. And I think having gone through all those really hard things in my early life, I was also starting to orient a lot towards a spiritual path. Because I think a lot of us who are in the dark kind of seek for those answers. And so, there was also this concept that was being introduced to me of sexuality and pleasure being a way to connect to the divine and to realize the divinity inside of us. And so I take a deep dive, as I usually do. Well, actually, I think this is important for people who are trying to find their journey. I had done a life coaching program probably like around the time life coaching started being popular. Like then I was 25, so maybe that was like 7 years ago. And I didn't even know what I was going to coach on. It was kind of like a general training. And so I feel like I almost underwent this like personal journey for like 5 years, and then did this second coaching program. And then just saw how extremely transformational the work was. And then, couldn't hold myself back from teaching other people. I completely transformed my relationship to my body, my creativity, my mission, my work in the world. It was fueled by a really deep embodied wisdom. So
Mm.
I think that on it, I think that's the behind the scenes that you don't see about people's journeys is like, yeah, I did my first coach training when I was 25. I didn't actually stop and, do my own practice until maybe I was 29, because I think I had to actually walk through the fires and the transformation myself for a while before it was almost like bursting out of me and I couldn't help but, give it to other people. And so I've been doing that since, and it's the best thing ever. I love it.
Yes, I so appreciate you being able to share about your own personal journey and how there were some of those twists and turns along the way. And I love how you talked about the second training. Really, at that point, you were ready to drop in and have that deep wisdom move through you in more of an embodied way that
Yeah.
allowed work to really land within you, but then also, radiate out and be so much more impactful for everyone that you're connecting with and who is experiencing you.
Yeah.
And I love how in your bio you spoke about this transformation that happened within yourself, and then again, how you're able to translate that out and share that with others about seeing sexuality as sacred, and um, how your own work in this space has allowed you to really deepen your connection with the divine. And I would love for us to be able to just have a bit of a conversation about the magic that exists in this space, and how you share this with your clients and community members that you work with.
Yeah. Well, I think that the first thing is really, giving honor to the lineages of Taoism and Tantra that have sort of included our sexual energy in this process of awakening. And so the way that I really teach this and the way that I relate to it is that our sexual energy is our life force energy. And it's actually the most powerful, most creative life force energy that we have inside of us. And not just related to, birth, even though, in very practical ways, it is associated with that, but of birthing life, of creation, of birthing things into the world. And so when you relate to your sexual energy as something sacred, as that life force energy, you can actually really see it as a gift, and as a way for you to tap into the flow of life, right? If we think about sexuality, pleasure, all of that, it's bliss, it's sort of melting your ego and being in the moment, fully giving yourself over to life. And all of that is really reminiscent of, spiritual teachings, releasing your ego, remembering who you really are, coming home to like the ecstatic bliss and the joy, um, master teachers, yes, there is like a deep peace inside of enlightenment, but they also almost always describe it as permeating love, huge amounts of bliss and joy and gratitude. And so, of course, in its non-shadow realm, that is exactly like pleasure and sexuality and sensuality. So yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I love it.
Yes. And even as you're describing this, I'm just like taking that in and absorbing how beautiful and how powerful that alignment is between the deep experience of pleasure and the deep experience of being on our spiritual path, of like what that feels like to be in that experience of bliss, of melting away the ego, of remembering who we are,
Mhm.
how powerful it is to be able to tap into that through the portal of pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Through the portal of our bodies. I think that's the other part is, a lot of spiritual traditions or spiritual paths that sort of like exclude and transcend the body. This instead is like also bring it down and in and realize that your body is like a microcosm of the divine. It was created by that. So as you worship yourself, you worship the divine.
Yes, as you worship yourself, you worship the divine. And I know that this connection, right, being able to drop into our bodies can sometimes come with a level of shock or discomfort, or just a lot of confusion or curiosity if that isn't the space where we've been living throughout
Yeah.
the course of our lives. And just wondering about, I know this is like a huge and beautiful and expansive body of work. So wondering if there are a few practices or recommendations that you would share with people as they are getting started, dipping a toe into this work. And yeah, just some of the ways that you support women with being able to really live more in the body and less in the mind.
Yeah. So one of my classic things that I teach is called my 5% pleasure rule. And so that is an invitation in every single moment of your life. How can you make it 5% more pleasurable? So, for
Mm,
example, we were setting up for this interview, and I was like, I really want to be outside. I have a big office day. So, I brought these flowers right here to be like in my line of view, just to make it just a little bit more pleasurable. And what this does is, it starts to orient you in easy and doable ways to start to choose yourself, to start to sort of unwind this like internalized capitalism that like pleasure and joy come second, and sort of flip that script a little bit and
yes.
lets you see that pleasure actually fuels you. It fills you up. It is the fire, the eroticism, the life, the creativity that actually supports your sacred work in the world, and not vice versa, right? It's not that work
Yes.
has to earn you that. And so, even for me, I did a takeout lunch, but I went and ate it at the park, right? Even if I eat takeout, I will still light a candle and play some jazz in the background. Those are things that can start to easily orient us there. And then the second thing that I would say is to deeply engage with your senses.
Mm,
And one of the things that I teach my students is that the whole world is sensual. The whole
mm,
world has colors, it has textures, it has sensations, it has sounds, it has smells. And anytime we are deeply connected to our senses, we're deeply connected to our body, we're deeply connected to that sensual nature, which
right.
I think is important for us to not just think that sensuality is sexual, but it's a way of being like deeply and like with all of life. And so anything you can do to connect to your senses is also a really powerful portal into pleasure, especially if it feels like, oh no, like, this is kind of difficult, or, it feels a little bit scary. Those are really beautiful paths to begin.
Yes. And I love that reminder, that affirmation that the whole world is sensual, and that we get to explore that. We get to have that be a part of our experience as we move through the world, not just in the experience of sex and sexuality, but like throughout the whole course of our life. And curious to hear a little bit more about what maybe are some of the common blocks or challenges that you help people move through in your group programs and your one-on-one coaching, and in terms of supporting women with really loving their bodies and seeing sexuality as sacred. um, what are the ways in which you've seen like beautiful transformation in this work, in terms of allowing that to ripple out and expand into greater personal empowerment?
Yeah. So I think the first part was, what are the common blockages? And, the things that I hear the most are some of the things that I named, but, really a lot of shame or conditioning from family or society, and a lot from religion, as well as, bad past experiences with people that maybe didn't respect our bodies, or sexual experiences where, we weren't centered, and then just like deep overall blanket shame of, as someone with a pussy, you are so not allowed to go there, even though we also expect you to fully be there at the same
Right.
time. And so, I think that one of the things that I love to name as a first step of moving out of the shame and out of this conditioning is to really name it, to name the sources of shame in the way that because shame is when we take something that is outside of us and that is sort of systemic or institutional or societal or whatever, and we internalize it, we make it personal.
Mhm.
And we take that and make it mean that there's something wrong with me. And when we can actually name those different sources of shame, or where we learn those stories from, or where those narratives come from, it creates a degree of separation where that level of separation can also have understanding. It can also have compassion. And from there, we start to sort of remove the internalized shame, bit by bit. And so it can be a journey, it can be a slow process, or it can just be like, no, I'm not taking that anymore. We can just choose to like skirt, go the other direction, right?
Yeah.
So that is a lot of the things that we talk about. And we also do embodied things to move it through us. So, for
Mm.
example, this morning I was leading a practice for one of my courses, and we were doing breast massage, which is really about connecting with your heart, connecting
Mm.
with this area of you, and just gently letting any like layers to melt, anything to disappear. And I think really it's just when you can create a container of love and intention and compassion for any part of you, it's like I was telling them, our bodies naturally want to heal, right? Our most natural impulse is towards thriving. We got a cut, our body naturally heals it, right?
Hey.
And so when you enter into a container of intention around healing this, what I find is that the parts of you that are ready to heal are like, yes, like please, like let me release. And maybe that's a part that people don't think is fun, but that's true sexual empowerment and any healing and any spiritual path. You're gonna walk through those shadows. You're gonna sometimes that grief is gonna be there, and it's
Sure.
beautiful. So I also orient them towards the beauty of that.
Mhm.
And when it comes to body love, it's really about actually feeding, touching, showing your body actual love. We think that love is this like weird sort of like, how do I get it? Where does it come from? And it's like, to me, love is action. You are a living, breathing embodiment of love, and you can redirect that into yourself in the way you touch yourself, in the way that you talk to yourself, in the way that you look at yourself. And I have seen that when people are in touch with their deep pleasure, with their deep orgasm, with like how big that potential and that energy is inside of their bodies, it's this concept of like healing through pleasure. It's like if you realize that your body can take you like woo to another place, make you feel so good, it makes it really hard to hate that body. And it really tunes you into like, this was all designed to feel all of the goodness, to help me experience the goodness of life. And
Mm.
so I've seen so many people just transform before my eyes, like going after things, showing up. I think one of our clients said, she dresses up and puts on her hoops to like do Beyonce on her Peloton. And it's just even the little
Yes.
moments of life like that where they're like living that just like make it all so worth it to me.
Yes, this is so powerful. And there's so much that you shared here that I'm like, ooh, I kind of want to pick up on this thread. But I really appreciated how you talked about really just grounding down this concept of love that sometimes feels like it's external or something that we have to grasp outside of ourselves, and remembering that actually we are these incredible, powerful sources of love, and that through the way that we touch ourselves, speak to ourselves, look at ourselves, like we can be cultivating more of that whenever we desire to. And then also this conversation about how our bodies are so designed to be able to experience this like immense pleasure. And I know that you just recently launched a new program that's specifically centered around orgasmic radiance, and wondering if you could share a little bit about just like the inspiration behind that, and what you're going to be building and expanding upon with this new cohort of women.
Yeah. So, really, the concept of orgasmic radiance is to teach people self pleasure as a deep act of self worship, but also like self generation, like to be able to go inside and to feel and cultivate and grow and be able to actually also hold the energy of our pleasure and our goodness inside of us. And of course, orgasm, is a beautiful way to do that. And, one of the sort of tricks of orgasm is that actually releasing the goal of orgasm is one of the most beautiful ways to actually achieve orgasm. And so it's not necessarily like, oh my God, you have to orgasm all of the time, but it is the practices that will awaken that energy inside of you. And it really is like a fuel. It's like a deep medicine. I mean, all of the scientific research out there in the world, all signs just point to orgasms are really freaking good for you, right? Oxytocin, dopamine, the love hormones, the hormones that associate us with taking risks, being creative, all of that gets produced inside of our bodies when we orgasm. And so I wanted to give a course where people could learn the actual really simple, tangible tools to have a deep connection with their orgasm and to also expand the experience of it. Because most people are relating to their orgasm still from this place of shame, right? Like you orgasm and then you like kind of, it's like that, or you're like kind of like, it's too much. I'm like partially checked out. And this is about like, can I anchor in it? Can I be in it? Can I like saturate myself in it as a way to show up for life, to show up for myself, to show up for my partnership, all of those things.
So incredible. And I would love to be able to, chat with you a little bit now as well about some of the ways in which entrepreneurship and just deepening into your own spiritual practice has been shifting and expanding you, and what some of your own current growth edges are in your life and in your work.
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. I mean, I think any entrepreneur that you interview will tell you that entrepreneurship is definitely the biggest personal growth, spiritual growth journey I think that I've been on so far. And, from the beginning, I have been really set on living my work, which is building my business through pleasure, resourcing in my pleasure, resourcing in my orgasm, my eroticism as a way to birth everything that I do. Um, and that's been hard. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. It is completely contradictory to, I was previously in tech. I was previously in like the opposite world.
Yeah.
And so it's really been a path of devotion. And I think it's really been a path of like, wow, you really get to choose every single thing that you do. You really get to choose all of the ways that this works. And I think when I first started, I was still on that programming of like, it's supposed to look this way and it's supposed to look that way. And I have to do this and I have to do that. And they were all things that, not all, but a lot of it felt contracted. It still felt like, I don't know, for lack of a better word in the moment, like old paradigm, like old ways of doing things. And so I would say like my first year and a half, I mean, God, even till today, it's like unwinding that. And so, I do try to get in my body and self-pleasure in the mornings as a way to feed myself. Also, sexuality ebbs and flows. So I'm not always like some orgasmic self-pleasuring 24/7. Like sometimes I journal, I meditate, sometimes I dance with my shadows and I purge. I think that recently, sort of the way that I've been seeing it is I am someone who wakes up in the morning with like my worries and a lot of like negativity bias, which I think a lot of people are like that. And
Yes.
it's like my first mission in my business and in my work in the world every day is to wake up and to let my ego die.
Mm.
And it's like through the ego dying, which to me is all the things that are like about me. I'm afraid. I'm afraid what people think. I'm afraid that it'll fail. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid to like hold that in love. And I think the first line of order is moving out of the ego so I can move into like the gift, move into the service, move into being clear and planted in like whatever I do, I'm going to give it my all. And that's actually something I heard someone named Sarah Durham Wilson say recently. She has an account called the Mother Spirit,
Mm.
and she's talking about this archetype of mother energy, which is like, I'm here. I'm right here and now in this conversation. I'm so fully here and I'm giving my all and my best to this thing. And I think every moment of every day is like, what do I need to do? What do I need to like deal with so I can like drop into that energy? Um,
Ah,
and some days it's easier than others. Some days it's, the only thing I do all day that's the most challenging.
sure.
And yeah, it's just a continued journey.
Yes. Oh, and this is so good. Moving, any day that we're stepping into, how do we find, like, what are the tools? What are the conversations, connections, relationships, experiences, self-pleasure? What do we need to be able to move out of ego and move into service? And I love that quote that you shared, like, whatever I do, I'm going to give it my all. And that being rooted in that place is something that can be just, yeah, so expansive, so empowering to remind ourselves
Mhm.
how to be able to wake up and step into the day from living in more of that empowered place, living from more of that place of understanding how impactful we can be in sharing of our energy in the world. And yes, I think it is so true that in this space of entrepreneurship, you're saying, like, there's so much unwinding, so much unraveling that gets to happen, especially if we're transitioning from a much more like traditional, linear, logical, capitalistic kind of paradigm to then moving into that space where just we're creating our own rules, and how to actually do that in a way where we're centering our own pleasure, our own values, our own integrity, brings up a lot. There's a lot to look at,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
dive into.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you bringing that to the surface and just sharing that of your own experience.
Yeah.
And so the question that I love to ask all of our guests is, what does soulful abundance mean to you?
Ah. I can like feel it in my body. It's like, I think it feels like the ground underneath me is like solid. It's there. And actually, recently, I feel like soulful abundance to me has been like a dropping in and deeper. So lately, what's been on my mind is like, what is this all really for? And it could be where I am in my life. I'm about to turn 32. I feel like I'm sort of crossing the threshold into a more rooted, grounded, more mature version of me. And it feels like knowing your values and why you're doing something so deeply that
Mm.
it saturates your soul. So, like recently, I've had the biggest month that I have had in my business. And I'm like, I just want to go sit by the river. I still just want to go camping with my partner. I just want to be able to hug my mom. I want to be able to go eat at this coffee shop that supports a local business owner. Like it's like discovering what are your actual true values and what feeds your soul without necessarily like chasing shiny objects, and then like feeling the ground of support underneath it. I think that comes from like that devotion to like creation and service, like holding you.
Ooh, yes, that's really beautiful. And I feel like that feels different than um, a lot of the ways in which we sometimes conceptualize, um, yeah, sourcing our abundance, that it's also about being held and being able to be in that space of continual supports. So I love that you present that. And also just, it was so beautiful the way you described doing something so deeply or feeling something and experiencing so deeply that it saturates your soul. So love, love, love this description that you shared. And just wondering if there are any other final thoughts or closing words that you'd love to share with our audience.
Yeah, I think I just want to tell you that as you go do all of your work in the world, just remember pleasure is the whole point. You are working to create, to have abundance for your pleasure, and whatever people are coming to you for is for their pleasure. So whether that is a human design reading, whether that is a delicious burrito, whether like whatever it is, remember that pleasure is the driver of us all. So be anchored into it first and foremost, and give of that pleasure and create more pleasure in the world in whatever form that is, then you will be fed and abundant. And it'll circulate and it'll be really beautiful.
Pleasure is the whole point in allowing that to be circular and generative. So, so gorgeous. So I am so grateful that we had this chance to connect today, and so, so excited to be able to share this conversation with our audience. I know our audience is going to be so excited about learning the ways that they can stay connected with you, learn from you, work with you. And so if you could share that with us now, that would be amazing.
Yes. So you can find me on theanne.com, and I have lots of different offerings from one-on-one coaching, longer deep dive group programs, and courses as well. I also have, this is just a famous class that I have, it's called BJ's for Your Pleasure, which you can just buy whenever you want. And it's great. It's about giving blowjobs that feel good for you. And I have a lot of fun on Instagram as well. So any way that you feel like you want to connect, I welcome you to the pleasure party. And yeah, thank you for this opportunity, Elise.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your time and amazing energy with our audience. And to everyone who tuned in, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to staying connected with you throughout the course of the festival. Be well, everyone.